All right, Nick, let's talk about the Nittany Lions. As far as missing out on college football playoff aspirations, this is the next best news you could hope for as a Nittany Lions fan. The hiring of a new offensive coordinator to help breathe some life into this offense. We talked about this in an earlier episode about the Lions, just talking about how it was a very balanced approach. There wasn't a lot of explosiveness in the offense, not necessarily ranking low anywhere, but not ranking high anywhere. And I think that's the next evolution of this team. Get that Drew Aller led offense, because he did announce he is coming back for 2024. Get it back up and going and help lead this team to the national championship, because that is the ultimate goal. But let's get into the article and we'll talk about it on the other side. This is, of course, from over on ESPN. It says Penn State is set to hire Kansas offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki for the same role as a source confirmed to ESPN. Kotelnicki has played a key role in Kansas's turnaround under coach Lance Leopold, who he also worked for at Buffalo and Wisconsin Whitewater D3 school. A Minnesota native, Kotelnicki oversees Kansas offense that ranks 29th nationally in scoring and yards per game. That might sound a little bit mundane, but this was all despite having their starting quarterback Jalen Daniels for most of the season due to back injury. Since the start of the 2022 season, Kansas ranked 6th nationally in yards per play at 6.99 and 22nd in points per game at 34.6 points per game. Obviously, all of this was probably with far less talent than Penn State has on their roster. And with Jalen Daniels being out for most of the season, this is a pretty impressive resume by Kotelnicki for the offense he runs, especially that rushing attack. It looks very explosive. It looks good. Neil looked great all season. So I think this is a big hire, a big move for Penn State. And I just want to know from the fans, Nick, before we hear from you, what do you think about this hire? Do you think this was the missing piece to this team? Do you think Kotelnicki has what it takes to get Penn State into that college football playoff talk? Let us know in the comments below. But Nick, what do you think about this hire, and what do you think it means for Penn State?
Well, first of all, it's a move they kind of had to make because, right, when you're Penn State and they've kind of had this air about them the last 5, 6 years or so, 10-win team, top 10 team, considered one of the better teams in college football. And then they lose to Ohio State, and then they lose to Michigan, right? And they finish 10-2, go play in a really nice bowl game, but they really just can't get over the hump. And right now, looking at this Penn State football team, it's clear offensive performance against the big guys is what's holding them back. Scored only 12 points against Ohio State with the late touchdown, only 15 against Michigan, once again with the late score. And watching this Penn State offense, one of the things that really jumped out to me against the better teams like Michigan and Ohio State, it just seemed so hard for them to consistently move the football. It seemed like everything was a struggle. And I thought them having a balanced approach would allow them to be more consistent. And it really didn't turn out to be that way. And making a change at the offensive coordinator is the right move. You brought out some great stats, Miles. I got some more for you. So in terms of yards per play, which is one of my favorite metrics to measure how hard an offense has to work, Penn State this past season, 2023, finished 76th in the country, 76. Kansas finished 9th in yards per play. Now, if you look at their other Big Ten rivals, which are compared to themselves against, Ohio State and Michigan, Ohio State was 20th, Michigan was 30th. So again, that's a big gap between 20 and 30 and 76. You bring in Kotelnicki to hopefully address that gap, because I think that's the one thing that's missing from this Penn State football team is some offensive explosiveness. They don't need the 70-yard plays. They just need the ability to pop a couple more 20 or 30-yard plays. So that way every single drive isn't another 3rd and 3, another 3rd and 5, another 3rd and 8. Put a lot of pressure on Allar in those situations. And while I think he's got the talent to handle that at times against the really good teams, it's uphill sledding. And look, this is a Penn State team. We talk about it all the time. They recruit very well. They've got, I think, as much as all the hate Franklin gets, I honestly think he's a very solid coach. I think you could do a lot worse. And people forget about this. Jim Harbaugh obviously has beaten Ohio State the last 3 times around. He was 0 for his first 5, and his former defensive coordinator, Dan Brown, that's his name, he was a critical negative for Michigan's defense in those matchups against Ohio State. Harbaugh makes a change at defensive coordinator. They go younger. They go more different. They try and do a little things more futuristic, I'll say, more modern in defense. And suddenly they're winning a lot more football games. They're beating Ohio State. I think this could have a very similar kind of effect for the Penn State offense as we look towards the future here.
Yeah, and that Michigan defensive coordinator goes off in the NFL, and he's doing great things there as well. McDonald, he looked really good. But I think Kotelnicki, he did really good. And let's talk a little bit about what he was able to do at Kansas, because I think this will put it in perspective for a minute. Go back to 2021, Kansas finished 104th in yards per play. Enter Kotelnicki. He comes in, and his second season, the Jayhawks improve to number 6 overall in yards per play. They go to a bowl game that year. This year, and this was the first time they ever made a bowl game since like 2008, so almost 20 years. Then this year, obviously, Jalen Daniels. I think this is probably the most impressive thing for me, Nick. Starting quarterback goes down. They're still top 10, ranked 8th, 9th in the nation in yards per play. That is extremely impressive to me. A good thing to put on your resume. Obviously, Kansas make another bowl game this year as well, most likely. So I think that is very impressive. Kansas, a team that was sliding for a long time, not very good, not very noticeable. The last 2 years, a lot of their success due to this guy and this offense that he runs puts them on the national stage. People are afraid to play Kansas. They're a tough team, and they will take it to you every single game. Large part of that is due to Kotelnicki's offense. And I think when talked about this, James Franklin said he wants a guy, and he said his own words, he wants someone who will be a head coach of the offense. So I'm imagining Kotelnicki has complete control of the offensive side of the ball. I think things are going to look a lot different, and I would be very excited if I was a Nittany Lions fan.
And just one more point, Maya. She brought up a great point that the fact that Kotelnicki took a bad Kansas offense, right, like 119 or whatever you said, to top 10. So this is a guy who's familiar with turning around offenses. An error Penn State could have made it is if they would have just hired a big name guy who's just a guy who just lives on talent and just tries to do whatever he can with the talent that he has. You've got a guy in Kotelnicki who's good at maximizing the players he has on the roster. I think that's what Penn State absolutely needed. Credit to Franklin for going out and getting this guy. And it looks like you alluded to, he'll let him run the offense on his own. And I agree with you 100%, Miles. This is the best news a Penn State fan could hear, obviously short of making the Big Ten title game.